My sister-in-law had no idea I owned the house she bragged about. "You're just living off my brother's money," she yelled. I smirked. "Is that so?" She called my in-laws to evict me, but when I showed the deed, she packed her bags in silence. My name is Tessa, and I should have known something was wrong the moment Nadia walked into my house with a measuring tape in her purse. She didn't ask to borrow it. She didn't explain why she needed it. She just pulled it out during what I thought was a casual visit and started measuring my windows while I was making coffee in the kitchen. 42 inches, she called out from the living room. Perfect for the curtains I saw at that boutique downtown. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories about standing up for ourselves. If you believe women deserve respect in their own homes, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I walked back in holding 2 steaming mugs, watching her stretch the yellow tape across the bay window where my grandmother's lace curtains had hung for the past 6 months. The same curtains I'd carefully cleaned and pressed when Mark and I first moved into the house I'd inherited. "What curtains?" I asked, setting her mug down on the coffee table. "Oh, just some ideas I've been having," she said, winding up the measuring tape with practiced efficiency. "These old things are so dated, don't you think? They make the whole room feel like a museum." The words stung more than they should have. Those curtains had been my grandmother's pride, hand-sewn Irish lace that had taken her 3 months to complete. They weren't dated. They were timeless. But Nadia was already moving on to the next window, her notebook out, scribbling down numbers. "I didn't realize you were redecorating," I said carefully. "Not redecorating," she laughed, settling into my favorite armchair without being invited. "Just optimizing. You have such good bones in this house, Tessa, but you're not using them to their full potential." She said it like she was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful for her unsolicited analysis of my home's shortcomings. I sat down on the sofa, wrapping my hands around my mug for warmth. "I'm actually really happy with how things look." "Of course you are," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "But sometimes we get so comfortable with our surroundings that we stop seeing possibilities. That's where fresh eyes come in handy." Fresh eyes. As if my eyes, the ones that had lovingly chosen every piece of furniture, every photograph, every small detail that made this house feel like home, were somehow stale or inadequate. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Not casual snapshots, but deliberate, methodical shots from multiple angles. She photographed my bookshelves, my kitchen counter, even the small collection of ceramic birds my grandmother had left me. "What are those for?" I asked, watching her crouch down to get a better angle of my coffee table. "Just documenting the current state," she said, snapping another photo. "It's always good to have a baseline before making changes." Before making changes. Not if. The assumption in her voice made my stomach tighten. I hadn't asked for changes. I hadn't even hinted that I was dissatisfied with anything. But somehow in the 15 minutes since she'd arrived, my home had become a project. Her project. "You know," she said, standing up and brushing imaginary dust off her designer jeans, "I've been thinking about hosting a little family gathering here next month. Nothing fancy, just the immediate family. But we'd want the place to look its best, you know? We'd want. Not I'd want. We'd want." "I wasn't planning on hosting anything," I said. "Oh, but you should," she insisted, walking over to examine my dining room table. "This house is perfect for entertaining. Mark mentioned you inherited it from your grandmother, right? She must have loved having people over." She ran her fingers along the table's surface, then opened the hutch where I kept my grandmother's china. Without asking, she pulled out a dinner plate and examined it in the light. "These are lovely," she said, though her tone suggested they were anything but. "Very traditional. We might want to supplement them with something more contemporary for the party." "What party?" I asked, following her into the dining room. "The one we should definitely have," she said, setting the plate back down with a small clink. "It would be such a shame to waste this space. And honestly, Tessa, you could use more practice with entertaining. It's an important skill for a wife to develop. An important skill for a wife to develop." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. As if my worth as Mark's wife could be measured by my ability to throw dinner parties that met her standards. "I'm not much of a party person," I said. "That's exactly why you need practice," she replied, moving back toward the living room. Don't worry, I'll help you plan everything. Menu, decorations, seating arrangements. The whole thing. It'll be fun. She said it like it was already decided. Like my preferences and comfort level were minor obstacles to be overcome rather than valid considerations to be respected. I watched her circle my living room again, this time making notes about furniture placement. She moved a lamp 3 inches to the left, adjusted the angle of a picture frame, and relocated a small vase from the mantel to the side table. There, she said, stepping back to admire her work. See how much better that flows. I looked at the changes she'd made. They were small, almost imperceptible, but they fundamentally altered the room's character. The lamp now cast harsh shadows where there had been soft, warm light. The picture frame, tilted at what she probably considered a more dynamic angle, now looked crooked and unstable. The vase, moved from its place of honor above the fireplace, seemed lost and forgotten on the side table. It looked fine before, I said. Fine isn't the same as optimal, she replied, pulling out her phone to take an after photo. You'll get used to it. Change is always uncomfortable at first. She stayed for another hour, moving through my house with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She rearranged my spice rack, reorganized my bathroom vanity, and even suggested I replace my bedroom curtains with something more romantic. When Mark came home from work, he found us in the kitchen, where Nadia was explaining her vision for updating my backsplash. Hey babe, he said, kissing my cheek. I see my sister's been keeping you busy. Just sharing some ideas, Nadia said brightly. Tessa's been so receptive to suggestions. Receptive. As if I'd been eagerly soliciting her advice instead of politely enduring her unsolicited criticism. That's nice of you to help, Mark said, but I caught the slight confusion in his voice. He looked around the kitchen, taking in the small changes she'd made throughout the day. It's what family does, Nadia said, gathering her things. We help each other become the best versions of ourselves. After she left, Mark and I stood in our rearranged living room, surveying the subtle but significant changes she'd made to our space. She means well, he said finally. I know, I replied, though something deep in my chest disagreed. That night I quietly moved everything back to where it belonged. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something that went beyond furniture placement and decorating suggestions. Nadia hadn't just rearranged my house. She'd rearranged the dynamic between us. And somehow, without my realizing it, I'd become the student in need of her instruction. My own home. 3 days later, Nadia returned with what she called housewarming gifts, though Mark and I had been living here for 8 months already. She swept through the front door carrying shopping bags from expensive home stores, her face bright with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for Christmas morning. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation, she said, unpacking items onto my dining room table without invitation. So I picked up a few things that'll really make this place pop. The first item she pulled out was a throw pillow, electric orange with geometric patterns that seemed to vibrate against the neutral palette I'd carefully chosen for the living room. Before I could say anything, she'd marched over to my grandmother's burgundy velvet sofa and placed it dead center against the carefully arranged cream and sage pillows I'd selected. See, she said, stepping back with her hands on her hips. Instant energy boost. The pillow looked like a traffic cone that had gotten lost at a furniture store. It clashed so violently with everything else in the room that I actually felt my eye twitch looking at it. It's very bright, I managed. Exactly, she exclaimed, pulling out more items. This whole place needs more personality. You play it so safe, Tessa. Next came a wall clock shaped like a sunburst, all sharp gold rays and modern angles. She hung it on the wall where my grandmother's watercolor landscape had been, moving the painting to what she called a less prominent spot behind the bookshelf. Time is the most important element in any room, she announced, adjusting the clock's position. And this one makes a statement. The statement it made was that someone with questionable taste had invaded my living room, but I kept that observation to myself. She continued unpacking. A metallic vase that looked like it belonged in a space station, coasters with abstract designs that hurt to look at, and a table runner made from some kind of shimmery fabric that seemed to change colors depending on the light. These will really tie everything together, she said, arranging them with the precision of someone decorating for a magazine shoot rather than a home where people actually lived. I watched her transform my space into something unrecognizable, each new addition feeling like a small act of aggression against everything I'd worked to create. But when I opened my mouth to protest, she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Trust the process, Tessa. I know it feels overwhelming now, but you'll thank me once you see the finished result. Finished result. As if my home had been unfinished before her intervention. The following Saturday, I returned from my morning yoga class to find cars in my driveway and the smell of garlic and herbs wafting from my kitchen windows. I walked through my front door to discover Nadia wearing one of my aprons, stirring something on my stove while Mark's parents and his younger brother sat around my dining table. "Oh good, you're back," she called out cheerfully as if I'd been expected to participate in whatever this was. "I'm making my famous lasagna for everyone. Mark mentioned you wouldn't mind if I used your kitchen." I looked at Mark, who was setting out napkins with the guilty expression of someone who'd forgotten to mention something important. "I thought you knew," he said weakly. "Knew what?" I asked. "That we were having a family lunch today," his mother, Patricia, said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nadia organized the whole thing. Such a thoughtful girl." I stood in my own foyer feeling like an intruder at my own family gathering. Everyone was seated comfortably, drinks poured, bread already on the table. The only empty chair was the one at the far end, the spot usually reserved for guests rather than the host. "Don't worry about helping," Nadia said, adding what looked like enough oregano to season a small restaurant's worth of food. "I've got everything under control. You just relax." Relax. My own home. While someone else played hostess at my table. During lunch, the conversation turned to work and Nadia saw her opening. "Tessa's been so busy with her little art projects," she said, passing the salad with a smile that managed to be both sweet and condescending. "It's wonderful that she has creative hobbies to keep her occupied." "They're not hobbies," I said quietly. "I'm a freelance graphic designer. I have clients." "Of course, dear," Patricia said in the tone people use when humoring children. "It's important to have interests outside the home. Though it's not like she brings in a real income," Nadia added with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes made of knives. "Not like Mark, obviously. But it keeps her busy and that's what matters." The words hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. I felt my face flush, but when I looked at Mark for support, he was focused intently on his lasagna, as if the secrets of the universe could be found in Nadia's ricotta layer. "Actually," I started, but Nadia was already moving on to ask his brother about his new promotion, effectively ending my chance to defend myself. After they left, I found myself walking through my house like a visitor in a museum, trying to remember what it had felt like when it was mine. The orange pillow seemed to mock me from the sofa. The sunburst clock ticked loudly, counting down moments in a space that no longer felt like home. Over the following weeks, I started noticing other changes. Small things at first. My grandmother's silver picture frame replaced with a modern black one, my favorite ceramic bowl switched out for something angular and white. When I asked about the missing items, Nadia explained that she was curating a more cohesive aesthetic. "Your grandmother had lovely things," she said, "but they were fighting with the overall energy of the space. I put them somewhere safe where they won't clash with the new direction we're going." We, as if this were a collaborative effort rather than a slow-motion invasion. The breaking point came 3 weeks later when I returned from a business trip to Chicago. I'd been gone for 4 days, working with a new client who was paying me more than Nadia probably made in 2 months. I was tired but satisfied, keys in hand as I approached my front door. The key didn't turn. I tried again thinking maybe the lock was sticking. Nothing. I checked to make sure I was using the right key, even though I'd used it hundreds of times before. Still nothing. Confused and slightly panicked, I rang my own doorbell. Nadia answered, wearing an apron I didn't recognize and looking surprised to see me. "Oh, Tessa," she said as if my presence at my own front door was unexpected. "Mark forgot to tell you about the security upgrade. We had new locks installed while you were away. Much safer than those old ones. You know how important home security is these days." She handed me a new key with the casual air of someone distributing party favors, but the gesture felt like something else entirely. It felt like being given permission to enter my own life. "Mark didn't mention anything about changing the locks," I said, testing the new key in the unfamiliar hardware. "Men never remember the details," she said with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. "Lucky for him, he has family looking out for his best interests." I stepped into my house. my house with its new locks and borrowed key, and realized that somewhere along the way I'd stopped being the owner and become the tenant. And the worst part was I wasn't sure exactly when it had happened. That Sunday started like any other family dinner, except I'd reached my limit with the kitchen drawer reorganization project that had been happening weekly for the past month. I walked into my kitchen to find Nadia elbow deep in what used to be my perfectly organized utensil drawer, redistributing everything according to what she called proper kitchen feng shui. My grandmother's wooden spoons were being relocated to make room for a set of silicone spatulas she'd brought over, claiming they were more hygienic and modern. "Nadia," I said, keeping my voice level, "please don't rearrange that drawer again. I need to be able to find things in my own kitchen." She looked up from her reorganization project with genuine surprise, as if I'd just asked her to stop breathing. "But Tessa, honey, this makes so much more sense. Look, all the serving utensils together, measuring tools in their own section. It's basic kitchen organization." "It was already organized," I said, watching her move my grandmother's silver cake server to what she deemed a less prominent position. "The way I had it organized. The way I could find everything." Mark's parents were setting the table in the dining room, well within earshot of our conversation. His brother and sister-in-law had arrived 10 minutes earlier and were making drinks, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen where our voices were getting slightly sharper. "Sometimes we can't see our own blind spots," Nadia said, continuing to rearrange despite my clear request to stop. "That's what family is for, to help us improve." The word, improve, hit me wrong. Everything in my life had apparently needed improvement since she'd started her campaign to transform my house. My furniture needed improvement. My decorating needed improvement. My hosting skills needed improvement. And now my basic ability to organize a kitchen drawer needed improvement. "I'm asking you to stop," I said more firmly. She paused, a bundle of measuring spoons in her hand, and looked at me with the kind of patient expression teachers use with difficult children. "Tessa, I'm trying to help you. There's no need to get defensive about constructive feedback. It's not feedback when you physically rearrange my belongings without permission," I said, moving to put the measuring spoons back where they belonged. "It's just rearranging my belongings without permission." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of the drawer sliding shut. From the dining room, I could hear conversations quieting as everyone tuned in to what was happening in my kitchen. Nadia straightened up and I watched something shift in her expression. The helpful, sisterly mask slipped just enough for me to see what was underneath. Something harder, more calculating. "You know what, Tessa?" she said, her voice carrying clearly into the dining room. "I think I understand the real problem here." She walked closer to me, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume and see the small lines around her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite hide. "The problem isn't that I'm trying to help. The problem is that you can't handle someone else having opinions about this house because you're so insecure about your place in it." I felt my breath catch. "Excuse me. You heard me." Her voice was getting louder, more confident, like she'd been building up to this moment for weeks. "You act like you own this place, but let's be honest about what's really happening here." The dining room had gone completely quiet. I could practically feel Mark's family leaning in to hear better. "You're just living off my brother's money," she said, loud enough that there was no doubt everyone had heard her clearly. "You don't contribute anything real to this household. You play around with your little art projects while Mark pays for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. Everything." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt my face get hot, but not with embarrassment. With something else entirely. Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face pale. "Nadia, what are you doing?" "I'm saying what everyone's thinking," she replied, crossing her arms. "Tessa acts like she's the lady of the manor, but she's basically a kept woman. No real job, no real income, no real claim to any of this." Patricia and Jim had materialized behind Mark, their faces showing a mixture of shock and fascination. Mark's brother was pretending to examine the wine bottle label while obviously listening to every word. I looked at Nadia, really looked at her, and felt something click into place. All those weeks of small invasions, subtle undermining and gradual territory claiming suddenly made perfect sense. She hadn't been helping or improving anything. She'd been positioning herself to have this exact conversation. "Is that so?" I said quietly, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Something in my tone must have registered because Nadia's confident expression flickered slightly. But she'd committed to her path now and she wasn't backing down. Yes, that's so, she said. And frankly, I think it's time someone called you out on it. You waltz around here making decisions about a house you have no real claim to, acting like you're some kind of equal partner when everyone knows Mark is carrying you financially. Nadia, stop, Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked confused, caught between defending his wife and dealing with his sister's public accusation. No, I won't stop, she continued. Someone needs to say it. Tessa, you're living in a house you didn't pay for, eating food you didn't buy, making rules about property that isn't yours. And when someone tries to help you improve the situation, you get territorial and defensive. She gestured around the kitchen as if presenting evidence to a jury. This isn't your house, Tessa. It's Mark's house that you happen to live in. There's a difference. My heart was pounding, but not from fear or embarrassment. From something that felt almost like relief. Because after weeks of subtle attacks and passive-aggressive undermining, Nadia had finally shown her hand. She'd finally said out loud what she'd been implying all along. And now I could respond. You're absolutely right, I said, watching her face light up with premature victory. There is a difference between living in someone else's house and owning your own. I walked over to the kitchen drawer where I kept important documents, the same drawer she'd been reorganizing moments earlier. I pulled out a manila folder and set it on the counter. There's also a difference, I continued, opening the folder, between making assumptions about someone's financial situation and actually knowing the facts. Nadia's expression was starting to change as I pulled out the document I'd been waiting months to show her. And the fact is, I said, holding up the deed to the house, this isn't Mark's house that I happen to live in. I set the deed on the counter where everyone could see it clearly. My name was printed in official black ink, with all the proper stamps and legal language that made ownership official and undisputable. This is my house that Mark happens to live in, I said. I inherited it from my grandmother. I own it completely. And that means when someone comes into my kitchen and tells me I have no real claim to my own property. I looked directly at Nadia, who had gone completely silent for the first time since I'd met her. Well, I said with a smile I'd been saving for exactly this moment, I get to tell them exactly how wrong they are. For exactly 3 seconds after I showed the deed, the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking in the hallway. Nadia stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language, her mouth slightly open, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to rage. That's impossible, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The county courthouse would disagree, I replied, keeping my tone conversational. Everything's properly filed and recorded. Has been since my grandmother passed away 2 years ago. Mark stepped closer to look at the deed, his eyes scanning the official language and legal stamps. I watched his face as the reality sank in, that his wife owned the house he'd been living in, that his sister had been systematically undermining the actual property owner, that he'd been complicit in letting it happen. Tessa, he said slowly, why didn't you ever tell me you owned the house? You never asked, I said simply. When we decided to move in together, you assumed it was yours because it had been in my family. I corrected you once early on, but you seemed to forget. After a while, it felt easier to just let it be. Patricia was examining the deed over Mark's shoulder, her face pale as she read my name clearly printed as the sole owner. Jim stood behind her, looking like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. But Nadia wasn't looking at the deed anymore. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted fury mixed with something that might have been humiliation. You let me believe. She started, then stopped, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, I said. You never asked me about the ownership. You never asked me about my finances. You just made assumptions and ran with them. This is fraud, she said, her voice getting shrill. You deliberately deceived us. You let us think Mark owned this place while you were plotting to... To what? I asked, genuinely curious where she was going with this. To live in my own house. To make decisions about my own property. To have opinions about how my own kitchen should be organized. Mark's brother cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should all just calm down and... Calm down. Nadia whirled on him, her voice rising to a level that made everyone in the room take a step back. She's been lying to all of us for months, making us look like fools. I haven't lied about anything, I said, my own voice getting firmer. I've been living in my house, making decisions about my property, and trying to be polite while you systematically tried to take over both. You manipulative little, she started, but Mark cut her off. Nadia, enough, he said, his voice carrying an authority I rarely heard from him. Tessa's right. She never lied. We assumed things that weren't true. Nadia laughed, but there was nothing funny about the sound. Don't you dare take her side on this, Mark. She made fools of all of us. She sat there while I tried to help improve this place, never once mentioning that she owned it. Help improve it? I said, feeling my own temper starting to rise. Is that what you call replacing my belongings with your decorations? Hosting dinners in my dining room without asking? Changing my locks? You changed the locks? Mark asked, looking at his sister with genuine shock. For security, Nadia said defensively, but her voice was losing some of its conviction. The old ones were practically antiques. Anyone could have broken in. Anyone except me apparently, I said. Since I had to ring my own doorbell to get into my own house. Patricia was shaking her head slowly, pieces apparently falling into place for her as well. Nadia, honey, what were you thinking? I was thinking that someone needed to help Mark's wife learn how to properly maintain a household, Nadia shot back. I was thinking that maybe if she put some effort into making a nice home, Mark would be happier. Mark was already happy, I said quietly. The only person who wasn't happy with how things were was you. That's when something in her expression snapped completely. The careful control she'd maintained even while shouting disappeared entirely. Her face flushed red and she looked around the kitchen like she was searching for something. Her eyes landed on the crystal vase she'd brought over weeks ago, one of her improvements that had been sitting on my sideboard ever since. Without warning, she lunged for it, grabbed it with both hands and hurled it across the room with a sound that was part scream, part sob. The vase flew past my head and crashed into the living room wall with an explosion of crystal and sound that seemed to echo forever. Pieces scattered across the hardwood floor, some sliding under furniture, others spinning to a stop near the fireplace. Right next to where it hit the wall was my grandmother's wedding photo, the one in the antique silver frame that had somehow survived Nadia's redecorating efforts. The impact had knocked it askew, and I could see a spider web crack spreading across the glass covering my grandmother's smiling face. You ruined everything. Nadia screamed, her voice breaking with the force of it. Everything I tried to do, everything I tried to build here. You ruined it all with your stupid deed and your stupid lies. Mark was staring at his sister like he'd never seen her before. Nadia, what is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? She laughed wildly, gesturing at the broken crystals scattered across my floor. What's wrong with me is that I've been trying to help my family while she's been playing games with all of us. Jim had his phone out and was dialing. I could hear him speaking quietly to someone, giving our address, mentioning property damage and a domestic disturbance. You called the police? Nadia asked, incredulous. You just threw a vase at my daughter-in-law in her own home, Patricia said firmly. Yes, he called the police. The word, daughter-in-law, seemed to hit Nadia like a physical blow. She looked around the room at all of us, her family, looking at her with expressions ranging from shock to disappointment to something that might have been fear. This isn't over, she said, but her voice was smaller now, deflated. You think you're so smart with your little deed, but this isn't over. Actually, I said, bending down to pick up a large piece of crystal that had landed near my feet. I think it is. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they found Nadia sitting on my front steps, no longer screaming but muttering to herself about betrayal and manipulation. They found me in my living room, carefully collecting pieces of broken crystal while Mark held a dustpan and apologized over and over again. They found a deed with my name on it, a damaged photograph of my grandmother, and a family that was finally seeing each other clearly for the first time in months. And they found a woman who owned her own house, sitting in her own living room, finally ready to defend what had always been hers. The officers left around 9 o'clock that evening, taking their incident report and leaving behind a house that felt different somehow, quieter but also more settled. Mark's parents had gone home immediately after giving their statements, Patricia hugging me tightly before she left and whispering, "I'm so sorry, honey," into my ear. Jim had shaken Mark's hand and told him to call if we needed anything, his usual gruff demeanor softened by what we'd all witnessed. Mark and I stood in the living room, surrounded by tiny pieces of crystal that caught the lamplight like scattered stars. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with things that needed to be said. "I need to ask you something," he said finally, crouching down to help me collect the remaining shards. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." I waited, holding a dustpan steady while he swept crystal into it with careful, precise movements. "How long have you been angry with me?" he asked, not looking up from his task. The question surprised me. I'd expected him to ask about the house, about my inheritance, about why I'd never insisted he understand the ownership situation. But this was deeper, more personal. "I wasn't angry with you," I said slowly, thinking about it. "I was disappointed. There's a difference." He sat back on his heels, finally meeting my eyes. "What's the difference?" "Angry would have been if you'd actively participated in what Nadia was doing. Disappointed was watching you choose to look the other way while she did it." He nodded, absorbing this. "That's fair. That's more than fair, actually." We worked in silence for a few more minutes, collecting the last pieces of Nadia's final tantrum. When the floor was clean, Mark sat down heavily on the sofa, running his hands through his hair. "I need to call them," he said. "My parents, my brother. I need to tell them the truth about what's been happening here." "You don't have to do that tonight," I said, sitting down beside him. "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "Because if I wait until tomorrow, I'll find reasons to put it off. And this needs to be said while I still have the courage to say it." He made the calls right there in the living room while I listened. First his parents, then his brother, then 2 aunts and his cousin who'd all heard Nadia's version of events over the past few months. Each conversation was essentially the same. Mark explaining that the house was mine, that Nadia had been out of line, and that he should have stopped it months ago. "No, Mom, Tessa didn't trick anyone," I heard him say during the longest call. "We just never asked the right questions and she was too polite to correct our assumptions. Yes, I know Nadia was trying to help, but helping doesn't include changing someone's locks without permission. No, this isn't about taking sides. This is about respecting the person who actually lives here." When he finished the last call, he looked exhausted but lighter somehow. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Like I should have done that 6 months ago," he said. "Like I've been a terrible husband and an even worse partner." "You haven't been terrible," I said. "You've been conflict avoidant." Which isn't the same thing, but it's not sustainable either. The next morning I called my lawyer. Sarah Martinez had handled my grandmother's estate, and she'd been the one to walk me through the inheritance process when my grandmother passed. She listened patiently while I explained the situation with Nadia, the assumption issues with Mark's family, and my desire to protect the property from any future challenges. "What you want is a revocable living trust," she said. "It'll protect the house and make your ownership absolutely clear to anyone who might have questions in the future. Plus, it'll make things easier for Mark if anything ever happens to you." 2 weeks later, I had a folder full of legal documents that made my ownership of the house ironclad and indisputable. I made copies, lots of copies, and stored them in multiple locations. The original deed went into a safety deposit box. A copy went into our home safe. Another copy went to Sarah's office. I even gave one to my sister, asking her to keep it somewhere secure. "You're being very thorough," Mark observed, watching me organize the documents. "I'm being smart," I replied. "I let assumptions slide once. I'm not letting it happen again." That weekend I started what I privately called the Great Restoration. I went through every room systematically, removing Nadia's additions and returning my own things to their rightful places. The orange pillow went into a donation bag. The sunburst clock went back to whatever trendy store it had come from. I actually returned it and got store credit. The metallic vase found its way to a neighbor who admired modern pieces. I brought my grandmother's lamp back out from the closet where Nadia had banished it. I rehung the family photographs she'd deemed too traditional. I painted the kitchen a warm sage green that reminded me of my grandmother's garden. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been slowly erased. Mark helped with everything, approaching each task with the focus of someone trying to make amends. He painted, hung pictures, and moved furniture without offering a single opinion about placement or color choices. When I asked what he thought about the green kitchen, he said, "I think it's your kitchen and I'm happy you're making it feel like home again." 3 weeks after the crystal vase incident, I decided to host Sunday dinner again. But this time the guest list was entirely different. I invited my sister Rachel and her 2 kids, my college roommate who lived nearby, and an elderly neighbor who'd become a friend over the past year. No one questioned my menu choices. No one rearranged my place settings. No one suggested improvements to my hosting style. We ate chicken pot pie and laughed about Rachel's 8-year-old son's attempt to train their cat to fetch. My friend shared stories from her recent trip to Ireland. The neighbor brought homemade rolls and complimented my grandmother's china, asking about the history behind the delicate rose pattern. It was the first dinner party I'd hosted in my own house where I felt like the host instead of the help. After everyone left, Mark and I cleaned up together in comfortable silence. As I was drying the last plate, he said quietly, "This is what it should have been like all along, isn't it?" "Yes," I said simply. "This is what home feels like." The next morning, I found an envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words written in Nadia's distinctive handwriting. "You'll regret this, Tessa." I read it twice, then walked calmly to the kitchen where my shredder lived in the pantry. I fed the letter into the machine and watched it disappear into tiny, harmless strips of paper. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, looking up from his coffee. "Everything's perfect," I said, and meant it completely. 6 months after the shredded letter incident, I was watering my grandmother's rose bushes when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up to see Patricia getting out of her sedan, carrying what looked like a covered casserole dish and wearing the slightly nervous expression she'd developed whenever she visited now. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she called out as she approached. "I made too much lasagna last night and I thought you and Mark might enjoy some." It was the 4th time in 2 months she'd brought over extra food, and we both knew it wasn't really about leftovers. These visits were her way of rebuilding a relationship that had been damaged by months of assumptions and misunderstandings. "I never mind," I said, setting down my watering can and brushing soil off my gardening gloves. "Mark's inside if you want to say hello." "Actually," she said, setting the dish down on the porch table, "I was hoping to talk to you first. If you have a minute." I gestured to the porch chairs and we sat down together in the late afternoon sunshine. Patricia was quiet for a moment, looking out at the garden that I'd been slowly expanding over the past year. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "A real one, not just the quick sorry I gave you that night when everything fell apart." "Patricia, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "Because I realized something about myself that I don't like very much. I was so focused on keeping peace in the family that I didn't pay attention to who was actually causing the problems." She turned to look at me directly. "Nadia is my daughter and I love her. But loving someone doesn't mean pretending they're not capable of being wrong. And she was very, very wrong about how she treated you." "She was struggling with some things," I said diplomatically. "She was jealous," Patricia said bluntly. "Jealous that you had what she wanted. A beautiful home, a devoted husband, a peaceful life. Instead of dealing with those feelings in a healthy way, she decided to tear down what you'd built." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder I'd recently installed near the rose bushes. "Can I ask you something?" Patricia said. "Why didn't you ever correct us when we assumed Mark owned the house?" It was a question I'd been asked several times over the past year, and I'd developed a clearer answer through thinking about it. "Because it didn't seem to matter," I said. "Mark and I were building a life together. Whether the house was legally mine or his didn't change how we lived in it or how we made decisions about it. At least it didn't until someone made it matter." "Nadia made it matter," Patricia said quietly. "Nadia made ownership into a weapon," I agreed. "And once it became a weapon, I had to defend myself with the truth." That evening, Mark and I were having dinner on the back patio, another addition I'd made during the restoration process. We'd installed string lights and planted herbs in containers, creating a space that felt both private and welcoming. "My mom seemed different today," Mark said, cutting into the lasagna Patricia had left. I don't know. More like herself, maybe?" "She's processing everything that happened," I said. "It takes time to readjust when you realize someone you trusted was manipulating situations." "Do you think Nadia was consciously manipulating things?" he asked. "Or do you think she genuinely believed she was helping?" It was a question I'd considered many times. "I think it started as helping and became manipulation when helping didn't get her what she wanted," I said. The scary part is, I don't think she could tell the difference by the end. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't inherited this house? Mark asked. If we'd been renting somewhere, or if I'd been the one with family property? You mean would Nadia have found other ways to undermine me? I considered this. Probably. The house was just a convenient target. If it hadn't been the house, it would have been my career or my cooking or how I folded laundry. People who need to diminish others will always find something to focus on. That's depressing, he said. It's realistic, I replied. But it's also empowering because once you understand the pattern, you can choose not to participate in it. 3 weeks later, I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a delivery truck in the driveway. The driver handed me a large envelope that required a signature. Inside was a legal document from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was a formal demand letter, claiming that I had unlawfully excluded a family member from joint family property, and demanding that I cease and desist from preventing reasonable family access to the shared residence. I read it twice, then called Sarah Martinez. This is interesting, she said after I'd read her the letter over the phone. Legally, it's complete nonsense. You can't be unlawfully excluded from property you don't own, and there's no such thing as automatic family access to someone else's private residence. But it tells us that Nadia hasn't given up. What should I do about it? Let me handle it, Sarah said. I'll send a response that makes it very clear that any further harassment will result in a restraining order. Sometimes people need official legal language to understand that their behavior needs to stop. That evening I showed the letter to Mark. He read it with increasing disbelief, shaking his head by the time he reached the end. She hired a lawyer to try to force her way back into our house, he said. She hired a lawyer to try to intimidate me into letting her back into my house, I corrected. There's a difference. Are you worried about this? I thought about it honestly. A year ago, receiving legal threats would have terrified me. But now, sitting in my own living room surrounded by my grandmother's furniture and my own choices, I felt remarkably calm. No, I said. I'm not worried. Because I know exactly who I am, what I own, and what I'm willing to accept. And I have the documentation to prove all of it. 2 days later, Sarah called to tell me that Nadia's lawyer had withdrawn the demand letter after receiving Sarah's response. Apparently, when faced with actual legal consequences for filing frivolous demands, both the lawyer and his client had decided to pursue other options. What other options? I asked. Hopefully moving on with her life, Sarah said. But if not, we're prepared for whatever comes next. That weekend, Mark and I were working in the garden together. He was building raised beds while I transplanted seedlings, when he stopped and looked at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. What are you thinking about? I asked. I'm thinking about how different this place feels now, he said. Not just because of the changes we've made, but because of how we are in it. How are we different? You're not apologizing for taking up space anymore, he said. And I'm not pretending that avoiding conflict is the same thing as solving problems. He was right. I moved through the house now with the confidence of someone who belonged there completely. I made decisions about furniture, decorations, and renovations without seeking permission or validation. I invited people over when I wanted company and said no when I didn't. I'd learned the difference between being polite and being a pushover. You know what I realized? I said, patting soil around a tomato plant. I spent so much energy trying to keep everyone happy that I forgot to make sure I was happy. But happiness isn't something you can give away to keep peace. It's something you have to claim for yourself. And have you, he asked, claimed it for yourself? I looked around at the garden we were building together, at the house that bore my name on its deed and my choices in its rooms, at the man who'd learned to listen and stand up for what mattered. Yes, I said, and meant it with every part of myself. I absolutely have. That night, as we sat on the back patio sharing a bottle of wine under the string lights, I thought about Nadia's voice in my head, the one that had whispered doubts about my worth, my contributions, my right to take up space in my own life. The voice was still there sometimes, but it was quieter now. And when it spoke, I had a response ready. A house with my name on the deed, a marriage built on honesty instead of assumptions, and the hard-earned knowledge that the truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be true. If this story of quiet strength had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Tessa calmly pulled out that deed while everyone watched in stunned silence. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Jessica, 32, and I stood frozen at my sister Rachel's engagement dinner as her fiancé Marcus confronted me publicly. Rachel had just mocked my career as a family court judge, calling me a failed lawyer who judges other people's families because she can't have her own. In that shocking moment, Marcus stood up and said, "You're the judge here tonight. Tell everyone what really happened 5 years ago." The entire family went silent, tension filling the room. I realized the secret I'd kept about Rachel's past was about to explode. Before I continue with this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. The events I'm about to share changed my entire understanding of family loyalty and justice. If you've ever had to make an impossible choice between protecting someone you love and doing what's right, please hit that like button. This family drama took me to the darkest places before I found the light, and I hope by sharing it, you'll see why sometimes the hardest judgments are the ones we make about those closest to us. Subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for truth even when it costs you everything. To understand what happened that night, you need to know about my relationship with Rachel. Growing up, I was always the straight-A student, the responsible daughter who followed the rules. I studied hard, helped around the house, and tried to make my parents proud in every way possible. I wasn't perfect by any means, but I tried my best to do what was expected of me. Rachel, on the other hand, was my polar opposite. 2 years younger than me, she was rebellious, charming, and somehow always our parents' favorite despite her constant troubles. Where I was shy and studious, Rachel was outgoing and popular. She could talk her way out of anything, flashing that winning smile that made teachers, parents, and pretty much everyone else forgive her latest transgression. Rachel's just spirited, my mother would say after she came home past curfew again. She's finding herself, my father would explain when she failed another class. Meanwhile, if I got an A- instead of an A, I'd face an hour-long lecture about living up to my potential. This dynamic defined our childhood. Rachel getting away with everything while I had to be perfect. I didn't resent her for it, not really. She was my little sister, and despite everything, I loved her. I thought it was my job to protect her, even from herself. When I left for college, I worked 2 jobs to support myself. My parents could have helped, but they were putting away money for Rachel's future because she might need it more. I didn't complain. I was proud of my independence and determined to make something of myself. Law school was my dream, and I threw myself into it completely. I graduated near the top of my class, passed the bar on my first try, and landed a job at a respectable firm. But even then, at family gatherings, my accomplishments were secondary to whatever new adventure Rachel was embarking on, whether it was backpacking through Europe on my parents' dime or starting a business that would inevitably fail within months. Rachel's pattern of taking from me became more apparent as we entered adulthood. She would borrow money with vague promises of repayment. She would flirt with men I was dating, sometimes successfully stealing them away with that effortless charm of hers. Once, she even interviewed for a job I had been pursuing, claiming she didn't know I was interested in the position. Each time, I forgave her. Each time, I told myself that's what sisters do. They forgive each other. My decision to become a family court judge wasn't part of my original plan. I had been working in family law, and a case involving a young girl caught in a custody battle between abusive parents changed my perspective. I realized I wanted to be in a position to actually help children like her, to make decisions that would protect them when the system and their own families failed them. When a judgeship opened up, I applied, and at 29, became one of the youngest family court judges in our state. Rachel's reaction to my appointment was telling. She congratulated me with a glass of champagne in one hand and a barb in the other. "Wow, so you're going to sit up there and judge other people's families? That's perfect for you, Miss Perfect." She laughed as though it was a joke, but I saw the jealousy in her eyes. After that, Rachel developed a new pattern. At every family gathering, she would find ways to belittle my career. "So did you ruin any families today, Judge Judy?" she would ask over Thanksgiving dinner. Or she would introduce me to her friends as my sister who couldn't make it as a real lawyer, so she became a judge instead. Each comment delivered with a smile, each barb disguised as sisterly teasing. And my parents? They would laugh along, telling me to lighten up when I finally objected. "She's just joking, Jessica," my mother would say. "Why do you always have to be so sensitive?" What none of them knew, what none of them seemed to notice, was that their words cut deeper because of what had happened 5 years ago. The secret that had cost me so much, the reason I couldn't have children of my own. I developed complications after an emergency surgery that I needed while caring for Rachel's child. The doctors had warned me that the infection might affect my fertility, but at the time, all I cared about was surviving. By the time I recovered, the damage was done. I would never be able to carry a child of my own. Rachel knew this. She knew what had happened, what I had sacrificed. And still, she mocked me for being childless. When Rachel announced her engagement to Marcus Bennett, I was genuinely happy for her. Marcus was a respected prosecutor whom I knew professionally. He was kind, intelligent, and stable, everything Rachel's previous boyfriends hadn't been. I thought perhaps he would be a good influence on her, that maybe this relationship would be the one to help her grow up. But as I watched them together at family functions, I wondered, did Marcus really know Rachel? Did he see past the charm to the selfish, sometimes cruel person beneath? Or was he like everyone else, captivated by the sparkling facade she presented to the world? I kept my doubts to myself. After all, who was I to judge my sister's relationship, even if that was literally my job in other contexts? But as Rachel's engagement dinner approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. I just didn't expect it would be Marcus himself who would tear down the careful walls of secrecy I had built around our family's darkest chapter. The engagement dinner was held at my parents' house, a spacious colonial in the suburbs where Rachel and I had grown up. My mother had gone all out for the occasion, hiring caterers and decorating the dining room with flowers and candles. It was exactly the kind of event Rachel thrived in, all attention on her, everyone gathered to celebrate her happiness. I arrived early to help set up, despite my mother's assurances that everything was under control. In truth, I wanted a few moments to prepare myself mentally for the evening ahead. I knew from experience that Rachel would find ways to highlight my shortcomings, to remind everyone present that despite my professional success, I was still alone, still childless, still somehow falling short of the mysterious standard by which she judged me. "Jessica, honey, you didn't need to come early," my mother said as she adjusted a flower arrangement. "But since you're here, can you check on the place settings? Rachel wants everything to be perfect." Of course she did. And of course, perfection was defined by Rachel's standards, not anyone else's. "Sure, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "How many people are coming?" "Oh, about 20. Family mostly, and a few of Marcus's relatives. His parents couldn't make it from Boston, unfortunately." I nodded, wondering if Marcus's parents' absence was truly unfortunate, or if they had their own reservations about Rachel. I pushed the thought away, chiding myself for my uncharitable assumptions. By 7 o'clock, the house was full. My aunts, uncles, and cousins who had watched Rachel and me grow up, who had witnessed our rivalry over the years without ever truly understanding its depths. A few of Rachel's friends, the kind who enabled her worst behaviors while calling themselves supportive. And Marcus's brother and sister-in-law, both looking slightly uncomfortable amidst the family chaos. I was sipping a glass of wine in the corner, chatting with my cousin Beth when Rachel and Marcus made their grand entrance. Rachel was radiant in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her hand prominently displaying the substantial diamond engagement ring Marcus had given her. Marcus looked handsome in a tailored suit, his arm around Rachel's waist, his expression one of genuine happiness. For a moment, seeing them together, I wondered if I had misjudged the situation. Maybe Rachel really had changed. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter for her. "Jessica," Rachel called out, spotting me. She pulled Marcus across the room. "There's my big sister, the judge." Always watching from the corner, aren't you, Jess? And just like that, my hope evaporated. The evening had barely begun, and already Rachel was taking aim.
Rachel.
You look beautiful, I said, choosing to ignore her comment. Congratulations again, Marcus. I'm so happy for you both. Marcus smiled warmly. Thank you, Jessica. It means a lot that you're here. Where else would she be? Rachel laughed. It's not like she has a husband or kids to get home to. I felt my face flush, but maintained my composure. Beth shifted uncomfortably beside me. Rachel, Marcus said, his tone carrying a gentle warning that Rachel either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Oh, Marcus, I'm just teasing. Jessica knows I don't mean anything by it. Don't you, Jess? Before I could respond, my mother called everyone to the table. I took my assigned seat, noting with resignation that Rachel had placed me directly across from herself and Marcus, ensuring I would have a front-row seat to their happiness throughout the meal. The first course was served, and conversation flowed around me. I spoke when spoken to, laughed at the appropriate moments, and tried to keep my anxiety at bay. But as the main course arrived, Rachel's attention turned increasingly toward me. So, Jessica, any interesting cases lately? She asked, cutting into her steak. Any families you've torn apart this week? Rachel, my father said mildly. That's not a very nice way to put it.
What?
I'm interested in her work, Rachel protested. All innocence. Jessica's the one who decides which parents deserve to keep their children and which ones don't. That's a big responsibility. It is, I agreed, trying to keep my voice level. And not one I take lightly. I'm sure you don't, Rachel said. But doesn't it ever bother you to make those judgments when you don't have kids yourself? I mean, how can you possibly understand what it's like to be a parent? The table went quiet. Even Rachel seemed to realize she had crossed a line. I may not have children, I said carefully, but I understand the law, and I understand what children need to be safe and loved. Of course you do, my mother interjected quickly. Rachel, dear, tell everyone about your honeymoon plans. Rachel seized the opportunity to change the subject, launching into a detailed description of the luxury resort in Bali where she and Marcus would be spending 2 weeks. But the reprieve was temporary. As dessert was served, Rachel returned to her favorite subject, my perceived inadequacies. Jessica, have you thought about dating apps? She asked suddenly. My friend Stephanie met her husband on one, and they're very user-friendly now, even for people who aren't tech-savvy. I'm quite comfortable with technology, Rachel, I replied. And yes, I've tried dating apps. And she pressed.
No luck.
I haven't met the right person yet. Well, you might want to hurry up, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. Your biological clock isn't getting any younger. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Rachel knew, she knew, that children weren't in my future. She knew why. And still, she twisted the knife. My parents exchanged glances, but said nothing. They never did. They never stood up for me against Rachel's cruelty. Maybe Jessica is focused on her career right now, Marcus suggested, clearly trying to defuse the tension. Rachel laughed. Oh, she's always focused on her career. Aren't you, Jess? A real career woman. A successful, independent woman who doesn't need a man or a family to be fulfilled. I set my fork down carefully. There's nothing wrong with being career-focused. Of course not, Rachel agreed with false sincerity. Especially when it's all you have. I mean, let's be honest, you're basically a failed lawyer who judges other people's families because you can't have your own. The room went completely silent. My cousin Beth gasped. My Aunt Gloria covered her mouth. Even my father looked shocked at the nakedness of Rachel's attack. But before I could respond, before anyone could say anything, Marcus set his napkin down and stood up. His face had changed completely. The warm, affable expression was gone, replaced by something hard and resolute. He looked at me, then at Rachel, then back at me. You're the judge here tonight, he said, his voice clear and firm. Tell everyone what really happened 5 years ago. The tension in the room was suddenly so thick I could barely breathe. Rachel's face drained of color. Marcus, what are you doing? She hissed. But Marcus's eyes stayed on me, waiting, challenging. And in that moment, I knew. Somehow, Marcus had discovered the truth. The secret I had kept for 5 years, at great personal cost. The secret that had shaped my career, my life, my very identity. The question was, did I have the courage to finally speak it aloud? I'd kept quiet to protect my sister all these years. But as I looked around at my family, at my parents who had always chosen Rachel, at my relatives who had watched her mistreat me for decades without intervening, at Rachel herself, her beautiful face now contorted with fear and anger, I wondered who I was really protecting and at what cost. The secret of what happened 5 years ago had been eating me alive. Maybe it was finally time to let it out. If you've ever had to choose between keeping a toxic family secret and speaking your truth, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. The weight of silence can be crushing, but breaking it? That's terrifying too. I was about to change everything, for better or worse. Stay with me as I reveal what really happened 5 years ago and how it changed all our lives forever. 5 years earlier, my life had been different. I was 27, working at a law firm specializing in family law, dating a wonderful man named David, and considering our future together. Rachel was 25 and living what appeared to be her best life, partying constantly, posting glamorous photos on social media, and dating a series of increasingly questionable men. Our parents worried about her, of course, but Rachel assured them she was networking and building her personal brand. Whatever that meant. In reality, I had begun to hear rumors about Rachel's wilder behavior. Drug use, all-night parties, relationships with married men. But whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she would accuse me of jealousy and judgment. Not everyone wants your boring life, Jessica, she would snap. Some of us actually want to live a little. So I stopped trying. I focused on my own life, my career, my relationship with David. Rachel and I drifted further apart, speaking only at family gatherings where she would perform the role of adoring sister for our parents' benefit. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was 3 a.m. when my phone rang. I fumbled for it in the darkness, heart racing with that particular fear that comes from middle-of-the-night calls. Hello. I answered groggily. Jessica. Rachel's voice was barely recognizable, slurred, panicked. I need help. Rachel? What's wrong? Where are you? The Sunset Motel. Room 117. Please come. Don't tell Mom and Dad. Please. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I woke David, explained the situation as best I could, and we drove to the motel together. It was in a sketchy part of town, the kind of place rented by the hour. I was terrified of what I might find. Room 117 was at the end of a dimly lit corridor. I knocked softly, calling Rachel's name. The door opened just a crack, and I saw my sister's face, bruised, one eye swollen shut. Oh my God, Rachel, I gasped. What happened? She pulled me inside, David following. The room was a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, empty bottles on the nightstand, the unmistakable smell of vomit, and something else, something chemical that I would later learn was meth. But what shocked me most wasn't Rachel's appearance or the state of the room. It was the small figure huddled on the bed, a little girl about 2 years old, watching us with wide, frightened eyes. Rachel, I whispered, whose child is that? Rachel began to cry, huge, racking sobs that shook her entire body. She's mine, she finally managed. Her name is Lily. I stared at my sister in disbelief. Yours?
How? When?
Rachel, I didn't even know you were pregnant. No one did, she said. I hid it. I was going to give her up for adoption, but then when she was born, I just couldn't. So I've been raising her. Sort of. Sort of. David asked, his voice tight with concern. He had moved closer to the bed, his eyes on the little girl who had yet to make a sound. I have a sitter usually, Rachel said defensively. But she quit last week. Said I wasn't paying her enough. And then tonight was bad. What happened to your face? I asked. My boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend now, I guess. He found out about Lily and freaked out. Said I'd been lying to him. Which, yeah, I had been, but he didn't have to hit me. David was examining Lily now, his medical training evident in the careful way he checked her over. Jessica, he said quietly, this child is malnourished. And I think she might be sick. She needs to go to a hospital. I looked at my sister, truly looked at her for perhaps the first time in years. She was rail-thin, her once beautiful face ravaged by what I now recognized as months, maybe years of drug use. She wasn't capable of caring for herself, let alone a child. We need to get both of you to a hospital, I said firmly.
Now.
Rachel didn't argue, which told me more than anything else how bad the situation was. We drove them to the emergency room, where doctors confirmed David's assessment. Lily was severely malnourished, had an untreated ear infection, and showed signs of neglect. Rachel tested positive for multiple substances and was admitted for observation. Child Protective Services was called, of course. I sat in a hard plastic chair in the hospital corridor, answering questions from a tired social worker who had seen it all before. No, I hadn't known about the child. No, I had no idea my sister was using drugs to this extent. Yes, I was willing to help however I could. When the social worker mentioned foster care for Lily, something in me rebelled. This was my niece. My blood. I couldn't let her go to strangers. I'll take her, I heard myself say. Temporarily, while my sister gets help. I'll take custody of Lily. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, court appearances, and crash courses in childcare. David was supportive but concerned about the sudden change to our lives. My parents were shocked when I finally called them, more by Rachel's drug use than by the existence of their granddaughter. They offered to take Lily themselves, but I hesitated. Their blind spot when it came to Rachel made me worry they wouldn't enforce the boundaries she desperately needed. So Lily came home with me. And over the next several months, as Rachel went through detox and entered a rehab program, I became a mother in all but name to a traumatized 2-year-old. It wasn't easy. Lily had nightmares. She was wary of adults, reluctant to speak, prone to tantrums when routines changed. But slowly, with patience and love and many consultations with child psychologists, she began to trust me, to flourish, to become the happy, healthy child she should have been all along. And I fell in love with her. Completely, utterly in love. Lily became the center of my world. David and I adjusted our lives around her needs, and though the strain eventually proved too much for our relationship, I never regretted my decision to take her in. 6 months into this new reality, disaster struck. I developed severe abdominal pain and was rushed to the hospital with what turned out to be a ruptured appendix complicated by a massive infection. The surgery saved my life, but resulted in complications that left me with extensive scarring in my reproductive system. The doctors were gentle but clear. I would never be able to carry a child. At the time, consumed with pain and focused on recovering so I could return to Lily, I didn't fully process this loss. It was only later, much later, that the full weight of it would hit me. I was still recovering when Rachel returned, 8 months after that terrible night at the motel. She was clean, looked healthy, and had a new boyfriend in tow. A wealthy real estate developer named James who seemed genuinely smitten with her. I'm ready to be a mom now, Rachel announced during her first visit to my apartment. James and I are getting a place together. He loves kids, can't wait to meet Lily.
Isterte her, skitseles.
After everything that had happened, after all the progress Lily had made, Rachel expected to simply waltz back in and reclaim her daughter as though she'd left her with a babysitter for the weekend. Rachel, I said carefully, Lily has been through a lot. She's stable now, happy. A sudden change wouldn't be good for her. She's my daughter, Rachel said, a familiar stubborn set to her jaw. I made mistakes, I know that. But I'm better now. I have a right to raise my own child. I wanted to argue. I wanted to point out that rights come with responsibilities Rachel had abdicated. I wanted to fight for Lily with everything I had. But then James mentioned lawyers. Expensive lawyers. And I realized that as much as I loved Lily, as much as I believed she was better off with me, I was still just her aunt. Rachel was her mother. And if Rachel could prove she was clean, stable, and able to provide for Lily, no judge would rule against her. The irony that I would later become that judge was not lost on me. So, I did what I thought was right. I worked with Rachel and her new boyfriend to transition Lily back to her mother's care. I arranged for family therapy sessions. I made Rachel promise to maintain Lily's routines, to continue her therapy, to put her daughter's needs first always. I will, Rachel assured me. I've changed, Jessica. I know you don't believe me, but I have. James is good for me. We're going to be a real family. I wanted to believe her. More than anything, I wanted to believe that Lily would be safe and loved with her mother. The day Rachel took Lily away was the worst day of my life. Worse than learning I couldn't have children, worse than when David and I broke up. Lily clung to me, confused and frightened despite all our careful preparations. "Don't go, Aunt Jessie," she sobbed. "Stay with you." I held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "I'll see you soon, sweet pea," I promised. "So soon. And you're going to have fun with your mommy and James. Remember all the toys they got for your new room?" Eventually, Rachel pried Lily from my arms and carried her to the waiting car, my niece's cries echoing in the stairwell long after they had disappeared from view. Rachel and James moved across the country a month later. For a while, Rachel sent regular updates and allowed me to video chat with Lily. But gradually, the calls became less frequent, the updates more perfunctory. And then they stopped altogether. When I tried to contact Rachel, she responded with brief texts claiming they were just so busy and promising to call soon. They never did. I considered flying out to see them, but what would that accomplish? Rachel had legal custody. Lily was, by all accounts, being properly cared for. And I had my own life to rebuild. The loss of Lily led me to reconsider my career path. I had seen firsthand how the family court system worked, its strengths and its many flaws. I wanted to be part of making it better. When a judgeship opened up, I applied, my personal experience informing my professional ambitions. As a judge, I took an oath of confidentiality regarding the cases that came before me. But my experience with Lily and Rachel was personal, not professional. Still, I kept it private. Partly to protect Rachel, partly to protect Lily, and partly, I admit, to protect myself from the pain of revisiting that loss. My parents knew some of what had happened, of course, but not the full extent of Rachel's neglect or my attachment to Lily. They certainly didn't know about my infertility, a private grief I shared with no one. And so the secret remained buried, a shadow over my life that no one else could see. Until Marcus somehow unearthed it and brought it into the harsh light of that engagement dinner. Back at the dinner table, time seemed suspended in the wake of Marcus's challenge. Rachel was the first to break the silence, her voice high and brittle with panic. "Marcus, I don't know what you think you know, but this isn't the time or place. When is the time, Rachel?" Marcus interrupted, his voice surprisingly gentle despite the firmness of his words. "After we're married? After you've constructed another elaborate lie for me to live inside?" He turned to me, his expression softening. "Jessica, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, but I found some old case files at work last week. Cases involving your sister. I've been trying to talk to Rachel about it privately, but she keeps denying everything." Rachel stood up so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. "You had no right to go through those files. That's confidential information." "I didn't go looking for it," Marcus said calmly. "I was researching a similar case and recognized your name. And once I read it, I couldn't unknow it." My mother was looking between us in confusion. "What files? What is he talking about, Rachel?" Rachel ignored her, focusing all her fury on me. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to ruin the one good thing in my life." The injustice of her accusation broke something in me. After years of silence, years of absorbing Rachel's cruelty without fighting back, years of protecting her at my own expense, something finally snapped. "My fault," I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. "Rachel, I have kept your secrets for 5 years. I have let you mock me, belittle me, make jokes about my childlessness when you know why I can't have children. I have done everything to protect you, and this is how you repay me? Jessica, my father said, his voice carrying a warning. Whatever this is about, we don't need to air our dirty laundry in front of guests. I laughed, a sound so bitter I hardly recognized it as coming from me. Of course not. Heaven forbid we acknowledge anything unpleasant in this family. Heaven forbid Rachel ever face consequences for her actions. What actions? My mother demanded. Will someone please explain what's going on? I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Then I took a deep breath and told the truth. All of it. The late-night call. Finding Rachel beaten and high with a toddler I hadn't known existed. Taking custody of Lily while Rachel went to rehab. Falling in love with my niece. The surgery that left me unable to have children of my own. Rachel's return with her wealthy new boyfriend. Her decision to take Lily away. The last time I spoke to Lily was over 4 years ago. I concluded, my voice breaking. Rachel moved across the country and gradually cut off all contact. I didn't fight it because I thought Lily was better off with her mother. I thought Rachel had changed. The silence that followed my story was deafening. My mother was the first to speak, her voice faint with shock. You had a baby? She asked Rachel. We have a granddaughter we've never met? Rachel's face had gone from pale to flushed during my recounting. It wasn't like that, she insisted. Jessica is making it sound worse than it was. I was going through a rough patch, yes, but I got better. I got clean. I took responsibility. Did you? Marcus asked quietly. Because according to the records I found, you abandoned Lily again less than a year after taking her from Jessica. It was my turn to be shocked. What? Marcus nodded grimly. When things didn't work out with James, Rachel left Lily with him. He tried to care for her for a while but eventually contacted social services because he wasn't her biological father and had no legal standing. Lily ended up in foster care. The room spun around me. Lily in foster care? After everything I had done to keep her out of the system? Is that true? I asked Rachel, my voice barely above a whisper. James was supposed to take care of her, Rachel said defensively. He said he would. He had the money, the big house. But then he met someone else, someone younger, and suddenly he didn't want to play daddy anymore. So you just left your daughter with him? My father's voice was incredulous. Your own child? I was in a bad place again, Rachel admitted. I couldn't take care of her. I thought she was better off with James. I felt physically ill. All this time, I had comforted myself with the belief that Lily was at least safe and loved, even if it wasn't with me. To learn that she had been abandoned again, that she had ended up in the very system I had tried so desperately to keep her out of, was almost unbearable. How could you not tell me? I asked, tears streaming down my face. I would have taken her back in a heartbeat. You knew that. I was ashamed, okay? Rachel shouted. I failed. Again. Is that what you want to hear? The golden child Jessica would never fail like that, would never make those mistakes. You'd be the perfect mother, right? You'd never let anyone down. That's not fair, I said. I never claimed to be perfect, but I loved Lily. I still love her. And you kept her from me. Stop it, both of you, my mother interjected. This is getting us nowhere. Rachel, we'll discuss your deception later. For now, Marcus, are you saying that our granddaughter is currently in foster care? Marcus hesitated. The records I found were from 3 years ago. I don't know her current status. The dinner party had devolved completely by this point. Relatives were whispering to each other, some looking shocked, others judgmental. Rachel's friends were clearly uncomfortable, trying to fade into the background of this family drama. My Aunt Gloria stood up. I think perhaps we should give the family some privacy to sort this out, she suggested. Beverly, Thomas, thank you for dinner. Rachel, Marcus, congratulations again on your engagement. There was a murmur of agreement as guests began to make their excuses and leave. Within minutes, only immediate family remained. My parents, Rachel, Marcus, and me. I can't believe you did this, Rachel said to Marcus as soon as the last guest departed. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I didn't want to, Marcus replied. I've been trying to talk to you privately for a week. But you kept avoiding the conversation, and then tonight, the way you were treating Jessica, I couldn't stay silent anymore. So you decided to blow up our engagement dinner? Great timing, Marcus. Rachel, my father interrupted. Stop trying to make this about Marcus. This is about you lying to us for years. About you having a child we never knew about. About you abandoning that child not once but twice. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I knew you would judge me. That's why I didn't tell you. We're your parents, my mother said, her voice breaking. We would have helped you. We would have been there for you and for our granddaughter. Like you were there for me when Jessica took Lily? Rachel shot back. You didn't even offer to help then. You were too busy being disappointed in me. Because you were on drugs, my father exclaimed. Because you had hidden a pregnancy and a child from us for years. What did you expect, Rachel? A parade? As my parents and Rachel continued to argue, Marcus moved to sit beside me on the couch. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to ambush you like this. I just couldn't marry her without knowing the truth, and she wouldn't tell me. I nodded, still trying to process everything. How much do you know? About Lily, I mean. Not much more than what I've said. The case files only had the initial report from social services when James surrendered her. I don't know where she ended up. I have to find her, I said, a new determination filling me. I have to know that she's okay. Marcus squeezed my hand. I'll help you. I have contacts in the system. Across the room, the argument had escalated. Rachel was sobbing now, my mother was crying too, and my father looked more defeated than I had ever seen him. This is all Jessica's fault, Rachel cried. She's always been jealous of me. She turned you against me, and now she's turned Marcus against me too. My mother, to my shock, actually rolled her eyes. Rachel, stop it. This victim act might work on strangers, but we've known you your whole life. This situation is entirely of your own making. Rachel stared at our mother in disbelief. For perhaps the first time ever, my mother was holding Rachel accountable instead of making excuses for her. I'm leaving, Rachel announced, grabbing her purse. Marcus, are you coming? Marcus stood but didn't move toward her. I think we need some time apart, Rachel, to figure things out. Are you breaking up with me? Over this? I'm not breaking up with you. I'm just saying we need time. This is a lot to process.
Fine, Rachel snapped.
Take all the time you need. But don't expect me to be waiting when you finally come to your senses. She stormed out, slamming the front door behind her. The four of us remaining stood in awkward silence for a long moment. I should go too, I finally said. It's late, and I have court in the morning. Jessica, my father began, but I shook my head. Not now, Dad. I can't have this conversation right now. I gathered my things and headed for the door. Marcus followed me out. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised. About Lily. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to speak, and drove home in a daze. The next morning, I woke to several missed calls and texts from my parents. I ignored them, needing time to collect myself before facing their questions and recriminations. But when my phone rang again just as I was leaving for work, I answered without checking the caller ID, assuming it was the courthouse. Hello. Jessica. My mother's voice was tight with anger. We need to talk about what you did last night. I stopped in my tracks. What I did? You humiliated your sister in front of her fiancé and our entire family. You brought up ancient history that no one needed to know about. Rachel is devastated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, Rachel has been lying to all of us for years. She abandoned her child, your grandchild, and never told any of us. And you're angry at me? That's in the past, my mother insisted. Rachel has worked hard to turn her life around. She's finally happy, finally stable, and you couldn't stand it, could you? You had to ruin it for her. I didn't ruin anything, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Marcus found out the truth on his own. All I did was confirm it when he asked. You could have denied it. You could have protected your sister. Like I've been protecting her my whole life? At what point does Rachel take responsibility for her own actions, Mom? At what point do you and Dad hold her accountable instead of making excuses for her? My mother was silent for a long moment. We've always tried to be fair to both of you, she finally said. But you were always so capable, so independent. Rachel needed more support. Rachel needed boundaries, I corrected. She needed consequences for her actions. Instead, you taught her that she could do whatever she wanted, and someone else would clean up her mess. Usually me. That's not fair, Jessica. None of this is fair, I agreed. It's not fair that Rachel abandoned her daughter. It's not fair that Lily ended up in foster care when I would have gladly raised her. And it's not fair that you're calling to berate me instead of holding your younger daughter accountable for her choices. We just want peace in the family, my mother pleaded. Can't you apologize to Rachel? Try to make things right. I laughed bitterly. Make things right? Mom, do you even hear yourself? The only thing that would make this right is finding Lily and making sure she's okay. That's what I intend to do, with or without your support. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and grief. For the first time in my life, I was done protecting Rachel. Done enabling my parents' favoritism. Done sacrificing my own well-being to maintain a facade of family harmony. It was time to find my niece and, perhaps, find some measure of justice for both of us. If you've ever had to stand up to your family and choose what's right over what's comfortable, you know it takes every ounce of courage you have. But sometimes, that moment of standing in your truth is the first step toward healing wounds you didn't even know could be healed. As I set out to find Lily, I had no idea how this journey would transform not just my life, but the lives of everyone in my family. Stay with me as I share what happened next. The day after the disastrous dinner party, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. I couldn't focus on other families' problems when my own was in such disarray. Instead, I met Marcus for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. Thank you for meeting me, I said as he slid into the booth across from me. He looked tired, the circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept much either. Of course, he replied. How are you holding up? I gave a hollow laugh. About as well as can be expected. My mother called this morning to blame me for ruining Rachel's happiness. Apparently, I'm supposed to apologize to her. Marcus shook his head. I don't even know what to say to that. Welcome to the Morgan family dynamics, I said dryly. Rachel does something terrible, I get blamed for not covering it up properly. It's been our pattern since childhood. I'm starting to understand that, Marcus said quietly. I knew Rachel had issues. Everyone has baggage, right? But I had no idea the extent of it. The lying, the manipulation, it's like I've been dating a completely different person than who she really is. Rachel is very good at showing people what they want to see, I acknowledged. I don't think she even does it consciously anymore. It's just how she navigates the world. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about our relationship, about all the inconsistencies I've noticed but dismissed. The way her stories sometimes don't quite add up. The mysterious gaps in her history. I feel like such a fool. You're not a fool, I assured him. Rachel is extraordinarily charming when she wants to be. And she's had a lifetime of practice hiding her true self. Still, he sighed. I'm a prosecutor. I'm supposed to be good at spotting lies. It's different when you love someone, I said gently. We all have blind spots for the people we care about. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, I brought us back to the reason for our meeting. You mentioned you might be able to help me find Lily? Marcus straightened, shifting into professional mode. Yes. I have a colleague in Child Protective Services who owes me a favor. I spoke with her this morning, and she's agreed to look into Lily's case. It might take a few days, though. These records can be complicated, especially if Lily has moved between jurisdictions. I understand, I said, trying to temper my impatience. And I appreciate your help. I know this puts you in an awkward position with Rachel. Rachel and I. He hesitated. I don't know what's going to happen with us, to be honest. I care about her, but I don't know if I can trust her anymore. And trust is everything in a marriage. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Part of me felt guilty for potentially destroying my sister's engagement, but a larger part recognized that Rachel had done that herself with her lies and manipulation. "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Are you prepared for what we might find?" Lily would be, 7 now? She may not remember you. The thought was like a knife to my heart, but I had considered it. I know. And she might be in a good situation now. Adopted by a loving family, happy and thriving. If that's the case, I won't disrupt her life. I just need to know that she's okay. And if she's not, if she's still in the system, then I'll do whatever it takes to get custody of her, I said firmly. I failed her once by letting Rachel take her. I won't fail her again. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you, and I'll help however I can. True to his word, Marcus's contact at CPS came through 3 days later. Lily was indeed still in the foster system, having been moved between 4 different homes in the past 3 years. Her current placement was with a foster mother named Eleanor Reed, who specialized in children with emotional and behavioral issues. Armed with this information and a carefully crafted legal strategy, I took another day off work and drove to the suburban neighborhood where Eleanor Reed lived. The house was a modest ranch-style home with a well-kept yard and a basketball hoop in the driveway. There were toys scattered across the lawn, evidence that children lived here and were allowed to play freely. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering my courage. What if Lily didn't remember me? What if she was angry that I had let her go? What if she rejected me outright? Eventually, I forced myself to approach the door and ring the bell. It was answered by a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Eleanor Reed?" I asked. "My name is Jessica Morgan. I called earlier about Lily." Recognition dawned on her face. "Yes, of course. Come in, please." She led me to a comfortable living room and gestured for me to sit. "Lily's at school right now," she explained. "She should be home in about an hour. That gives us some time to talk, which I think is important before you see her." I nodded, relieved and disappointed at the same time. "How is she?" Eleanor's expression was carefully neutral. "Lily is complicated. She's extremely bright, creative, sensitive. But she has significant trust issues, as you might expect given her history. She struggles with attachment, with believing that people who say they love her won't eventually leave." My heart ached at this description. Has she talked about her early life at all? About her mother, or me? "She doesn't speak much about her past," Eleanor said. "But she does have one clear memory that she mentions sometimes. A woman she calls Aunt Jessie, who used to sing to her and make her feel safe. Would that be you?" Tears sprang to my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, that's me." Eleanor's expression softened. "I thought so. The timing fits with what little information I have about her case. May I ask, how did she end up in your care specifically?" "Lily has been through several foster placements," Eleanor explained. "She's what the system calls a difficult placement. She has trouble connecting with foster parents, often acts out when she starts to feel comfortable somewhere, almost as if she's testing whether they'll send her away. And unfortunately, several did. I've had her for about 8 months now. We've had our challenges, but we're making progress." I nodded, trying to absorb this information without letting it overwhelm me. "What happens now? Legally, I mean, I'm her aunt, but I have no custody rights currently." "That depends on what you want to happen," Eleanor said frankly. "Are you looking to re-establish contact with Lily? Visit occasionally? Or are you seeking custody?" "Ultimately, I want what's best for Lily," I said carefully. "If that's remaining with you, then I would never disrupt that. But yes, ideally, I would like to pursue custody. I've never stopped loving her or thinking about her." Eleanor studied me thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty and your consideration for Lily's well-being. Too often, I see biological family members waltz back into a child's life expecting everything to be easy, not understanding the damage that's been done." "I understand it won't be easy," I assured her. "I'm a family court judge. I see these cases every day. I know the road ahead would be long and complicated for both of us. She raised an eyebrow. A judge? That's impressive. My experience with Lily actually influenced my career path, I admitted. I wanted to be in a position to help children like her. Before Eleanor could respond, we heard the front door open and the sound of children's voices in the hallway. That would be Lily and the others, Eleanor said, standing. I'll talk to her first, explain who you are. It might be best if this first meeting is brief. We don't want to overwhelm her. I nodded, my heart racing. Of course. Whatever you think is best. Eleanor left the room, and I heard her greeting the children, directing some to start homework or have snacks. Then there was a quieter conversation I couldn't quite make out, followed by footsteps approaching the living room. And then she was there. Lily. 5 years older than when I'd last seen her, but unmistakably the same child. She had Rachel's delicate features, but darker hair and eyes that reminded me of our father. She stood in the doorway, half hidden behind Eleanor, watching me with a wariness that broke my heart. Lily, Eleanor said gently, this is Jessica. She says she's your aunt. Do you remember her? Lily stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, in a small voice, she asked, Aunt Jessie? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. You used to sing the dinosaur song, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I managed. The one about the dinosaur who was afraid of the dark until his mom gave him a nightlight. A tiny smile flickered across her face and made shadow puppets on the wall. That's right, I said, smiling through my tears. You remembered. I thought you were gone forever, Lily said, a hint of accusation in her voice. Like everyone else. I'm so sorry, Lily, I said, resisting the urge to cross the room and gather her into my arms. I never wanted to leave you. I never stopped thinking about you, or loving you. She regarded me skeptically, with a worldliness no 7-year-old should possess. That's what they all say. I know, I acknowledged. And I know it's not fair to ask you to trust me right away. But I hope you'll give me a chance to prove it to you. Lily looked up at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. Miss Ellie says you want to visit me sometimes. I'd like that very much, I said. If that's okay with you. Lily considered this for a moment. I guess that would be okay. She finally said with the elaborate casualness of a child trying not to show how much they care. If you want to. I do want to, I assured her. Very much. Our first meeting was brief, as Eleanor had suggested. We talked a little about Lily's school, her favorite subjects, art and science, and the book she was currently reading. I was careful not to make promises I couldn't keep or to push for more emotional connection than she was ready for. When it was time for me to leave, Lily surprised me by asking, Will you come back tomorrow? If Miss Ellie says it's all right, I replied, looking to the foster mother for guidance. Eleanor smiled. I think that would be fine. Perhaps you could come for dinner? I agreed eagerly, already counting the hours until I could see Lily again. Over the next few weeks, I established a routine of regular visits with Lily. I rearranged my court schedule to free up afternoons and weekends. Eleanor was supportive, recognizing the positive effect our reconnection was having on Lily despite some initial setbacks. During this time, I also met with Marcus to discuss legal strategy. His experience as a prosecutor, combined with my knowledge of family court, gave us a strong foundation for building a case for custody. The fact that you previously had temporary custody of Lily works in your favor, Marcus pointed out during one of our strategy sessions. As does your profession and financial stability. The main hurdle will be explaining why you didn't maintain contact with Lily after Rachel took her. I trusted my sister, I said simply. I believed she had changed and would be a good mother. By the time I realized something was wrong, they had moved across the country, and Rachel had cut off communication. I didn't know Lily had been abandoned again until you told me at the dinner party. Marcus nodded. That's understandable. And it's the truth, which is always the best approach in court. What about Rachel? I asked hesitantly. Have you spoken to her? Marcus's expression tightened. Briefly. She's not taking things well. She's convinced herself that you and I conspired to ruin her life, that we're having some sort of affair. I winced. That sounds like Rachel. Rewriting reality to make herself the victim. She's threatened to fight any custody petition, Marcus warned. She says she's Lily's mother and has rights. Rights she abdicated years ago, I pointed out. But yes, I expected as much. Rachel has never been able to admit when she's wrong or accept the consequences of her actions. There's something else you should know, Marcus said hesitantly. Something I discovered during my investigation. Rachel has been receiving child support payments from James all these years, even after she left Lily with him. I stared at him in disbelief. How is that possible? James continued the payments, assuming the money was going toward Lily's care and foster care. Rachel never corrected his assumption. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, given everything else I knew about my sister, but somehow it still did. So, she abandoned her child but kept taking money meant for her care? That's fraud. It is, Marcus agreed grimly. And it's evidence we can use in court if necessary. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and determination. I never wanted it to come to this, I admitted. A legal battle against my own sister. But Lily deserves better than what Rachel gave her. She deserves stability, love, consistency. She deserves you, Marcus said simply. As my relationship with Lily strengthened and my legal strategy took shape, I knew I was approaching a point of no return. Filing for custody would mean permanently altering my relationship with my sister, possibly with my parents as well. It would mean committing to raising a child with significant emotional needs, rearranging my life and career to accommodate her. But when I looked at Lily, at her cautious smile that appeared more frequently now, at her intelligent eyes that watched me for signs of rejection, at the way she gradually allowed herself to lean against me during our reading sessions, I knew there was no choice to make. I had failed her once by letting her go. I wouldn't fail her again. The day I filed the custody petition was both terrifying and liberating. I was taking a stand, not just for Lily, but for myself. For the first time in my life, I was directly challenging the family dynamics that had shaped and often damaged me. I was saying, clearly and publicly, that Rachel's behavior was unacceptable, that her charm and manipulation would no longer shield her from consequences. As I expected, Rachel retaliated immediately. She called our parents, told them I was trying to steal her daughter. She sent me threatening texts and voicemails. She even contacted my supervisors at the courthouse, suggesting I was abusing my position as a judge to pursue a personal vendetta. None of it deterred me. With Marcus's support and Eleanor's guidance, I stayed focused on what mattered, giving Lily the stable, loving home she deserved. The legal process moved forward, and a court date was set. As the day approached, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened, I had done everything I could. I had acted out of love for Lily, not out of anger at Rachel. And for perhaps the first time in my life, I was standing firmly in my own truth, regardless of what my family thought of me. The night before the hearing, I received an unexpected call from Rachel. "Jessica," she said when I answered, her voice surprisingly subdued. "We need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied cautiously. "Not the night before court. Anything you want to say can go through our lawyers." "Please," she said, and I was startled to hear what sounded like genuine emotion in her voice. "Just hear me out. Then you can decide what to do." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop near my apartment. When I arrived, Rachel was already there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. The polished facade she usually presented to the world was cracking. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "What do you want, Rachel?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She took a deep breath. "I want to make a deal. Drop the custody case, and I'll make it right with Mom and Dad. I'll tell them it was all a misunderstanding. We can go back to the way things were." I stared at her incredulously. "The way things were? You mean with you mistreating me at every opportunity and our parents enabling you? With Lily in foster care, while you cashed child support checks meant for her care?" That's your idea of making it right? You don't understand, Rachel insisted. I'm trying to save our family. If you go through with this tomorrow, if you tell a courtroom full of strangers all our private business, there's no going back. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. Maybe they won't, I acknowledged. But I need to be able to forgive myself. And I could never do that if I abandoned Lily again. She's my daughter, Rachel said, a note of desperation entering her voice. Whatever mistakes I've made, she's still mine. Being a mother isn't just biology, Rachel. It's showing up. It's putting your child's needs above your own. It's doing the hard work day after day, even when it's inconvenient or difficult. You haven't done any of that. I could change, she insisted. I could do better. I shook my head, not unkindly. You've had 7 years to be Lily's mother. You chose not to be. Now I'm choosing to be there for her in the way she deserves. Rachel's expression hardened. So that's it? You're choosing a kid you barely know over your own sister? Your own family? I'm choosing what's right, I said simply. Something our family has never been very good at. I stood to leave, but Rachel grabbed my wrist. You'll regret this, she said, her voice low and intense. When Mom and Dad disown you, when you're all alone with a troubled kid who's more than you bargained for, you'll wish you had listened to me. I gently removed her hand from my wrist. Goodbye, Rachel. I'll see you in court tomorrow. As I walked away, I felt an unexpected lightness. Rachel's threats, which once would have terrified me into compliance, now held no power. I was no longer the little girl desperate for her family's approval, willing to sacrifice her own well-being to maintain peace. I was a woman standing in her own power, fighting for what she believed in. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, that realization was enough. The irony of entering a family courtroom as a petitioner rather than a judge wasn't lost on me. I had sat on the bench for countless custody hearings, listening to passionate arguments from both sides, weighing evidence and testimony to determine a child's fate. Now I would be the one pleading my case, subject to another judge's evaluation and decision. The courtroom was familiar yet strange from this new perspective. The polished wooden tables, the state seal on the wall, the slightly uncomfortable chairs, all looked different from the other side of the bench. I sat beside my attorney, David Kaufman, a respected family law specialist whom I knew from professional circles. Marcus sat directly behind us, a silent show of support that meant more than he could know. Rachel arrived just minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin, accompanied by an attorney I recognized as Stuart Reynolds, one of the most expensive family lawyers in the city. My parents followed, taking seats directly behind Rachel in a clear show of allegiance. Neither of them looked in my direction. Eleanor entered with Lily's court-appointed guardian ad litem, a woman named Patricia Chun whom I knew to be thorough and child-focused. Lily herself wouldn't be present for most of the proceedings, a standard practice to shield children from potentially traumatic courtroom confrontations. Judge Harriet Wilson entered, and we all rose. I had appeared before Judge Wilson many times as an attorney, but never as a judge myself. She was fair, experienced, and not easily swayed by emotional appeals, exactly the kind of judge I aspired to be. Good morning, Judge Wilson said after taking her seat. We're here in the matter of Morgan versus Morgan, a petition for custody of the minor child Lily Morgan. Are all parties present and prepared to proceed? Both attorneys confirmed they were ready, and the hearing began. David presented our case first, methodically laying out the facts. My prior temporary custody of Lily, my stable home and career, the strong bond Lily and I had reestablished over the past several weeks. Eleanor testified about Lily's progress since our reconnection, describing how the child had begun to open up, to trust, to show fewer behavioral issues. In your professional opinion, David asked Eleanor, would it be in Lily's best interest to be placed in Ms. Morgan's custody? Eleanor didn't hesitate.
Yes.
Jessica has shown consistent commitment to Lily's well-being. She has educated herself about trauma-informed parenting, adjusted her schedule to accommodate Lily's needs, and demonstrated patience and understanding through some difficult moments. Lily has responded positively to their relationship. She feels safe with Jessica, which is no small thing for a child with Lily's history. Rachel's attorney cross-examined Eleanor aggressively, suggesting that I had manipulated Lily or turned her against Rachel. Eleanor remained calm and professional, sticking to her observations and expertise. Next, Marcus testified about discovering Lily's case and the subsequent investigation that revealed Rachel's abandonment of Lily and continued collection of child support payments. On cross-examination, Rachel's attorney tried to portray Marcus as biased due to his relationship with me, insinuating we had conspired against Rachel out of romantic interest in each other. Mr. Bennett, Stuart Reynolds asked, his voice dripping with insinuation, how would you characterize your relationship with Jessica Morgan? Marcus met his gaze steadily. Jessica is my friend. We share a concern for Lily's welfare, nothing more. A concern that conveniently arose after you and Rachel became engaged? One might wonder about the timing. I discovered Lily's case through my work, Marcus replied evenly. I didn't go looking for it. Once I knew the truth, I couldn't in good conscience ignore it, regardless of my relationship with Rachel. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. I had prepared extensively with David, anticipating the difficult questions that would come. I spoke honestly about my relationship with Lily, about the circumstances that had led to her initial placement with me, and the heartbreaking decision to return her to Rachel. Why didn't you maintain contact with Lily after she left your care? Judge Wilson asked directly. I tried, I explained. For the first several months, Rachel allowed video calls and send updates. But gradually, those communications became less frequent and then stopped altogether. When I tried to reach out, Rachel would give excuses about being busy or promise to call soon, but never did. Eventually, they moved across the country, and Rachel stopped responding to my messages entirely. And you didn't pursue legal action at that time? No, Your Honor. I had no reason to believe Lily wasn't being properly cared for. Rachel had completed rehab, seemed stable, and had a supportive partner. I trusted that she was finally being the mother Lily deserved. Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully. What changed? I learned from Marcus Bennett that Rachel had abandoned Lily again, this time leaving her with her boyfriend when their relationship ended. Lily ended up in foster care as a result. Had I known this at the time, I would have immediately sought custody. Stuart Reynolds's cross-examination was brutal, as I had expected. He portrayed me as jealous of Rachel, vindictive, using Lily as a pawn in a lifelong sibling rivalry. He questioned my ability to care for a child with Lily's complex needs while maintaining my demanding career as a judge. Isn't it true, he asked, that you've always resented your sister's relationship with your parents? That you've always felt second best? I took a deep breath before answering. My relationship with my parents is complicated, as many family relationships are.
But this case isn't about that.
It's about Lily and what's best for her. And you believe you know what's best for Lily better than her own mother? I believe that actions speak louder than words, I said calmly. Rachel has had numerous opportunities to be a mother to Lily. She has chosen repeatedly not to be. I'm choosing to be there for Lily, to give her the stability and love she deserves. When Rachel took the stand, she was the picture of contrition. Tears welled in her eyes as she described her struggles with addiction, her efforts to get clean, the difficult decisions she had made for Lily's benefit. I was young and stupid, she admitted. I made terrible mistakes. But I've grown. I've changed. I want a chance to be the mother my daughter deserves. Ms. Morgan, Judge Wilson asked, can you explain why you left Lily with James Crawford when your relationship ended? Rachel dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I was in a bad place emotionally. James was stable, had a good job, a nice home. I thought Lily would be better off with him temporarily while I got back on my feet. Did you maintain contact with Lily during this period? Rachel hesitated. I called when I could. It wasn't as often as I should have, I know that now. And were you aware that Mr. Crawford eventually surrendered Lily to social services? Not at first, Rachel admitted. He didn't tell me. By the time I found out, she was already in the foster system, and they said I would have to go through the courts to get her back. I was trying to figure out my next steps when all this happened. Judge Wilson's expression remained neutral, but I had seen that slight narrowing of her eyes before. She wasn't buying Rachel's story. Are you currently receiving child support payments from Mr. Crawford? Rachel's composure slipped momentarily. Yes. But I've been saving that money for Lily. For her future. Can you provide documentation of these savings? Not immediately, but I can get them. The questioning continued, with Rachel's story becoming increasingly convoluted as she tried to explain away the damning evidence against her. When Stuart Reynolds produced character witnesses, friends who testified to Rachel's changed nature and maternal instincts, their statements seemed hollow against the documented pattern of neglect and abandonment. The most powerful testimony came near the end of the day when Lily's therapist, Dr. Sarah Mendez, took the stand. She spoke eloquently about Lily's attachment issues, her fear of abandonment, and her gradual progress in trust with consistent caregivers. In my professional opinion, Dr. Mendez concluded, the worst thing for Lily at this point would be another disruption in her primary attachment. She is beginning to trust that Jessica will not abandon her. To remove her from that relationship now would likely cause significant regression in her emotional development. After Dr. Mendez stepped down, Judge Wilson called for a brief recess to review the evidence before hearing closing arguments. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught sight of Rachel in an intense conversation with her attorney. She looked frustrated, her carefully constructed facade crumbling as the reality of her situation became clear. My parents stood nearby, my father looking grim, my mother openly weeping. They still hadn't acknowledged my presence, treating me as if I were invisible. The pain of their rejection was real, but duller than I would have expected. In fighting for Lily, I had found a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a certainty that transcended my lifelong need for their approval. How are you holding up? Marcus asked quietly, joining me in the hallway. Better than I expected, I admitted. No matter what happens, I know I've done everything I can for Lily. Marcus nodded. For what it's worth, I think Judge Wilson sees through Rachel's performance. The inconsistencies in her testimony were pretty glaring. I hope so, I said. But judges have to consider many factors in custody cases. It's never as straightforward as it seems. When we returned to the courtroom for closing arguments, Stuart Reynolds painted a passionate picture of a mother who had made mistakes but deserved a second chance, of the sacred bond between mother and child that shouldn't be severed. He characterized me as interfering in a relationship I couldn't understand, driven by jealousy and resentment rather than genuine concern for Lily. David's closing was more measured, focusing on facts rather than emotion. He reminded the court of Rachel's pattern of abandonment, her failure to maintain contact with Lily, and her continued collection of child support payments for a child she wasn't caring for. He emphasized my stable home, my professional understanding of family dynamics, and most importantly, the strong bond Lily and I had formed. Your Honor, David concluded, this case ultimately comes down to one question. Who has consistently put Lily's needs first? The evidence clearly shows that Jessica Morgan has been the one constant in this child's life, the one person who has always considered Lily's welfare above all else. We ask the court to recognize that reality and grant full custody to Ms. Morgan. Judge Wilson thanked both attorneys and announced she would take some time to consider her ruling. This is a complex case with significant implications for all involved, particularly the child, she said. I want to give it the careful consideration it deserves. Court will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 for my decision. The hours of waiting that followed were among the longest of my life. I went home to my empty apartment, trying to distract myself with work, with television, with anything that might keep my mind off the imminent decision that would shape not just my future, but Lily's as well. I had done everything I could. I had spoken my truth, presented the evidence, and fought for what I believed was right. Now it was in Judge Wilson's hands. Around midnight, my phone rang. I answered without checking the caller ID, assuming it might be David with some last-minute question or information. Hello, Jessica. It was my father's voice, sounding older and more tired than I had ever heard it. We need to talk. I sat up straighter, instantly alert. Dad? Is everything okay? No, he said simply. Nothing is okay. Our family is being torn apart in a public courtroom. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since we got home. Guilt tugged at me, but I pushed it aside. I'm sorry for Mom's pain. I truly am. But this isn't about hurting anyone. It's about protecting Lily. Is it? He challenged. Or is it about finally getting back at Rachel for all the times you felt we favored her over you? The accusation stung, but I had anticipated it. Dad, I understand why you might think that. But I want you to consider something. If I were motivated by jealousy or revenge, would I be fighting to take on the responsibility of raising a traumatized 7-year-old? Would I be rearranging my entire life, my career, my future plans? That's not revenge. That's love. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, my father sighed. Rachel says she's changed. That she deserves another chance. Maybe she has changed. I conceded. I hope for her sake that she has. But Lily can't afford to be another test case for Rachel's growth. She's already been abandoned twice. She needs certainty, stability, permanence. And you think you can provide that? I know I can, I said with quiet conviction. I love her, Dad. I've loved her since the moment Rachel placed her in my arms 5 years ago. I never stopped loving her, even when I couldn't be with her. Another long pause. Your mother and I, we should have seen what was happening. With Rachel, with Lily. We should have been there for you both. It was as close to an apology as my father had ever come. Yes, I agreed softly. You should have been. I don't know what the judge will decide tomorrow, he said. But whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Jessica. For standing up for what you believe is right, even when it wasn't easy. Even when it meant standing against your family. Tears filled my eyes.
Thank you, Dad.
That means more than you know. Get some sleep, he advised. Tomorrow will be a long day for all of us. I hung up, my heart lighter than it had been in years. My father's words weren't a full reconciliation, and they certainly didn't erase decades of hurt. But they were a beginning, a small acknowledgement that perhaps, finally, he saw me. Sleep came eventually, though it was restless and filled with anxiety dreams. I arrived at the courthouse the next morning feeling simultaneously exhausted and wired, my nerves stretched to their breaking point. Marcus was waiting outside, a cup of coffee in each hand. He handed one to me with a small smile. Thought you might need this. You're a lifesaver, I said gratefully, taking a long sip. Have you seen Rachel or my parents? He shook his head.
Not yet.
But I did see Eleanor and the guardian ad litem heading in a few minutes ago. We made our way into the courtroom, where David was already reviewing his notes. The room gradually filled as 9 o'clock approached. Rachel arrived with Stuart Reynolds, looking composed but tense. My parents slipped in just before the bailiff called the court to order, taking seats in the middle of the gallery rather than directly behind Rachel, as they had the day before. I took it as a small but significant sign. Judge Wilson entered, her expression giving nothing away. After the formalities were concluded, she cleared her throat and addressed the courtroom. In custody cases, she began, the court's primary concern is always the best interest of the child. This standard encompasses many factors: stability, continuity, the child's emotional needs, the capacity of each potential guardian to provide care and guidance, and the history of the relationships involved. She paused, looking down at her notes. Having carefully reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in this case, I find a clear pattern of behavior from Rachel Morgan that is inconsistent with the stable, nurturing environment that Lily Morgan requires. Despite multiple opportunities to maintain a relationship with her daughter, Ms. Morgan has repeatedly chosen to abdicate her responsibilities as a parent. Rachel made a small, distressed sound, but Judge Wilson continued, without acknowledging it. Conversely, Jessica Morgan has demonstrated consistent commitment to Lily's welfare, even at significant personal cost. The testimony of Eleanor Reed, Dr. Mendez, and others has established that Lily has formed a secure attachment to MS. Morgan and is thriving under her care and attention. My heart began to race as I realized where Judge Wilson's ruling was heading. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that full legal and physical custody of Lily Morgan be granted to Jessica Morgan, effective immediately. The relief that washed over me was so intense it was almost painful. Beside me, David squeezed my arm in silent congratulation. Furthermore, Judge Wilson continued, given the evidence of financial impropriety regarding child support payments, the court orders Rachel Morgan to repay all child support funds received from James Crawford during periods when Lily was not in her care. These funds will be placed in a trust for Lily's future educational needs. Rachel stood up abruptly. This isn't fair. She's my daughter. Ms. Morgan, Judge Wilson said sharply, control yourself or you will be held in contempt. Stuart Reynolds pulled Rachel back into her seat, whispering urgently in her ear. The court will establish a visitation schedule for Rachel Morgan. Judge Wilson continued once order was restored. Initially, these visits will be supervised by a court-appointed monitor. If Ms. Morgan demonstrates consistent engagement and appropriate behavior during these visits over a period of 6 months, we will revisit the possibility of unsupervised visitation. She looked directly at Rachel.
Ms.
Morgan, I want to be clear. This ruling is not intended to permanently sever your relationship with your daughter. Should you demonstrate meaningful change, not just in words but in actions, this court would look favorably on expanded visitation rights in the future. The door is not closed unless you choose to close it. With that, Judge Wilson concluded the hearing, and the courtroom began to empty. I sat still for a moment, trying to absorb the reality of what had just happened. I was now, officially, Lily's legal guardian. The responsibility was enormous, but so was my joy. Rachel stormed past me without a word, Stuart Reynolds hurrying after her. My parents hesitated near the door, then approached slowly. Congratulations, my father said awkwardly. We hope this works out for the best. For Lily and for you. Thank you, I replied. I hope you'll want to be part of Lily's life. She could use grandparents who love her. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Of course we will. She's our granddaughter. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. There would be time later to address the deeper issues in our family, the patterns that had led us to this point. For now, it was enough to know that they weren't completely lost to me. Marcus approached as my parents departed. Well, Judge Morgan, he said with a small smile, it looks like you've won. It's not about winning. I corrected him gently. It's about doing right by Lily. He nodded. I know. And for what it's worth, I think you'll be an amazing mother to her. Thank you, I said, emotion welling up again. For everything. I couldn't have done this without your help. Yes, you could have, he disagreed. You're the strongest person I know, Jessica. I just helped speed things along a bit. As we left the courthouse together, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Lily's trauma wouldn't disappear overnight, and the family wounds exposed during this process would take time to heal, if they ever did. But for the first time, I was walking my own path, guided by love rather than fear, by conviction rather than obligation. The 6 months following the court's decision were a whirlwind of change and adjustment. Lily moved in with me the weekend after the hearing, bringing her few possessions in a small suitcase and a garbage bag, a heartbreaking reminder of how unsettled her young life had been. Is this really my room? She asked when I showed her the bedroom I had prepared, her eyes wide at the sight of the pale blue walls, the bookshelf filled with children's books, the comfortable bed with its colorful quilt. It really is, I assured her. All yours. We can change anything you don't like. She walked around slowly, touching things with careful fingers, as if afraid they might disappear. I never had my own room before. Not a real one. The comment broke my heart, but I kept my voice light. Well, you have one now. And it's yours for as long as you want it. There were challenges, of course. Lily had nightmares several times a week, waking in terror, convinced I had left her. She tested boundaries constantly, as if waiting for me to give up on her the way others had. She had outbursts of anger that seemed disproportionate to their triggers until I learned to recognize the deeper fears behind them. I read every book I could find on trauma-informed parenting. I consulted with Dr. Mendez weekly. I joined a support group for adoptive and foster parents. I learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, how to be the parent Lily needed. My career required adjustment as well. I reduced my caseload temporarily, rearranged my schedule to accommodate school pickup and therapy appointments, and learned to set firm boundaries between work time and family time. Some of my colleagues were understanding, others were not. I didn't care. Lily came first now, and I made sure everyone knew it. Rachel followed through on her threats to fight the custody ruling, filing appeal after appeal, each more desperate than the last. She showed up for only 2 of the supervised visits scheduled with Lily, both times behaving so inappropriately that the court monitor had to end the sessions early. After that, she seemed to lose interest, missing subsequent appointments without explanation. My parents, true to their word, made efforts to be part of Lily's life. They visited regularly, bringing thoughtfully chosen gifts and taking genuine interest in getting to know their granddaughter. There was still awkwardness between us, still unaddressed hurts and patterns, but we were trying. For Lily's sake, and perhaps for our own as well. Marcus remained a steadfast friend throughout this transition period. He helped with practical matters, assembling furniture for Lily's room, recommending a good pediatrician, even picking Lily up from school one day when I was stuck in court longer than expected. More importantly, he provided emotional support when the weight of my new responsibilities felt overwhelming. "You're doing great," he assured me during one particularly difficult week when Lily had been sent home from school for hitting another child. "Lily's adjusting. You're adjusting. It's going to take time. I just want to get it right," I confessed. "I'm so afraid of failing her." "The fact that you worry about that is exactly why you won't fail her," Marcus said. "You care. You're trying. That's what matters." For months after Lily came to live with me, Rachel announced she was moving to California to pursue new opportunities. She made no arrangements for continued contact with Lily, not even a goodbye. While part of me was relieved, Rachel's sporadic involvement had been more disruptive than helpful. I also grieved for Lily, who despite everything still asked about her mother occasionally. "Where did Mommy go?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. "Why doesn't she want to see me?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "Your mom has a lot of problems that make it hard for her to be a good parent. It's not because of anything you did. It's not your fault. Did she ever love me?" Lily's voice was small, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. "I believe she did," I said honestly. "I believe she still does in her way. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people aren't able to show love in the ways we need them to." Lily considered this for a moment. "Are you going to go away too?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, kiddo." She smiled slightly at that. "Promise." "I promise. I'm your mom now, and moms keep their promises." It was the first time either of us had used that word, mom, to describe my relationship to Lily. It had happened naturally, without planning or discussion, and it felt right. "Can I call you Mom?" Lily asked hesitantly. "Instead of Aunt Jessie?" Tears pricked my eyes. "I would like that very much. But only if you want to. There's no rush to decide." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I want to. Not all the time, maybe. Sometimes, still Aunt Jessie. Is that okay?" "That's perfectly okay," I assured her. "You can call me whatever feels right to you." 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected visit from my father. He arrived on a Saturday morning while Lily was at a playdate with a friend from school. "Dad," I said in surprise when I opened the door. "Is everything okay? Where's Mom?" "Your mother's fine," he assured me. "She's at her book club. I wanted to talk to you alone, if that's all right." I invited him in, curious and slightly apprehensive. We had been civil, even friendly, during his visits with Lily, but we hadn't had any substantive conversations about the events of the past year. "Coffee?" I offered. "Please." As I prepared the coffee, my father wandered around my living room, looking at the photographs now displayed on the walls. Lily at the park, Lily and me making silly faces for the camera, Lily proudly holding up an art project from school. "She's flourishing with you," he observed as I handed him a mug. "Anyone can see that." "She's an amazing kid," I said. "Resilient, smart, funny. I'm lucky to have her." My father took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down carefully. "Jessica, I owe you an apology. Several, actually." I blinked in surprise. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the custody hearing. About our family, about the way your mother and I parented you and Rachel, about the patterns we established and reinforced over the years." He took a deep breath. "We failed both of you in different ways. We enabled Rachel's worst behaviors instead of setting boundaries that might have helped her grow. And we took you for granted, expected you to be the strong one, the responsible one, without acknowledging how much pressure that put on you." I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. "I appreciate you saying that, Dad. It means a lot." "I'm not saying this just to clear my conscience," he continued. "I'm saying it because I want things to be different going forward. For all of us, but especially for Lily. She deserves better than the dysfunctional patterns our family has perpetuated." "She does," I agreed. "And I'm doing my best to break those patterns with her." "I can see that," my father said. "You're a wonderful mother, Jessica. Better than your mother and I were parents, I'm afraid." "I've had good examples of what not to do," I said, trying to lighten the moment with humor. My father winced but nodded. "Fair enough. But I hope it's not too late for us to learn. To do better. To be the parents and grandparents you and Lily deserve." "It's not too late," I assured him, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "We're all still here. Still trying. That counts for something." Before leaving, my father handed me an envelope. "I found this while going through some old papers," he explained. "I thought you might want to have it." Inside was a photograph I had never seen before. Rachel and me as young children, maybe 5 and 3, sitting on a porch step with our arms around each other, both laughing at something beyond the camera's view. We looked happy, genuinely happy in each other's company, without the competition and resentment that would later define our relationship. "Thank you," I said softly. "I'd forgotten we were ever like this." "You were," my father confirmed. Before things got complicated. I thought it might be good for Lily to see this side of her mother someday. To know that there was good there once." I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. My father hugged me awkwardly before leaving, the physical contact rare enough between us to feel significant. That evening, after Lily was in bed, I sat looking at the old photograph, thinking about families and the complex, sometimes painful bonds that connect us. Rachel and I had once been just two sisters who loved each other. Somewhere along the way, that simple love had become twisted by favoritism, comparison, and unmet needs. Our parents had played their part in that distortion, but so had we, with the choices we'd made and the stories we'd told ourselves. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't heal Rachel's wounds or undo the damage her choices had caused Lily. But I could choose a different path forward. I could be the parent Lily needed, the judge who understood the complexities of family dynamics in a deeply personal way, the woman who had finally learned to stand in her own truth without apology. 6 months to the day after Lily came to live with me, I received notice that Rachel had dropped her final appeal. She had also, according to the court document, signed away her parental rights entirely, clearing the way for me to adopt Lily legally if I chose to pursue that option. I shared the news with Lily carefully, unsure how she would react. We were sitting at the kitchen table, working on a jigsaw puzzle together, when I brought it up. "I have some news about your mom, about Rachel," I said, using both terms as had become our custom. "She's decided that she wants you to stay with me permanently. That means no more court hearings, no more uncertainty." Lily continued fitting puzzle pieces together, her expression thoughtful. "Does that mean she's never coming back?" "I think it probably does," I said gently. "At least not for a very long time." Lily nodded, absorbing this. Is it because she doesn't love me?
No, sweet bear.
It's because she's not able to be the kind of mom you need right now. And I think, in her own way, she knows that. Are you going to be my forever mom? Lily asked, looking up at me with those serious eyes that seemed too old for her young face. I would like to be, I said, if that's what you want to. Lily thought about this for a moment, then nodded decisively. I want that. I want to stay with you forever. Then that's what we'll do, I promised, wrapping my arms around her. We'll be family, you and me, forever. Later that week, I returned to the courtroom, this time to my own courtroom, where I had resumed my full caseload now that Lily was settled in school and our routine was established. I looked out at the families before me. Parents fighting for custody, children caught in the middle, lawyers arguing their clients' cases with varying degrees of passion and skill. I saw them all differently now. Not just as cases to be decided, but as human beings navigating complex emotional terrain, carrying wounds both visible and invisible, trying in their imperfect ways to build or preserve connections that mattered to them. My experience with Lily hadn't made me less objective as a judge. If anything, it had made me more discerning, more able to see past the surface presentations to the underlying dynamics. I understood now, in a bone-deep way, that family was about more than biology. It was about showing up day after day. About putting someone else's needs above your own. About love expressed through actions, not just words. At the end of the day, I returned home to find Lily waiting on the front steps, a drawing in her hand. I made this for you, she said proudly, holding it out. It was a picture of two figures, one tall, one small, standing together under a smiling sun. The taller figure wore what appeared to be a black robe and held a gavel. Underneath, in Lily's careful printing, were the words, "My mom, the real judge." I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the moment. I love it, I told her. And I love you. I love you too, Mom, Lily said, the word still new enough to send a thrill through me every time she used it. We went inside together, hand in hand, toward the future we were building one day at a time. A future based not on obligation or blood, but on choice. On love. On the family we had created for ourselves out of the broken pieces of the past. It wasn't the family I had imagined for myself all those years ago. It was better. It was real. And it was ours. If this story has touched something in you about family, justice, or finding the courage to stand in your truth, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. We all face moments when we have to choose between keeping the peace and doing what's right, especially with family. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about a time when you had to make a difficult choice for the right reasons. Did it turn out the way you expected? What did you learn? Your experiences matter, and they might help someone else facing a similar crossroads. Before you go, please hit that like button if my story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more real stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for staying with me through this journey, from that shocking moment at the dinner table to the new life Lily and I have built together. Sometimes the hardest judgments we make are the ones that finally set us free.